Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here's your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Hello, everyone, and happy February. My name is Tim Wilson. I am the founder and host of the People in Fundraising Professional Conversations webcast. And today I am delighted to welcome Jenn Grasso to our program. Jenn is representing Vacationland, the way life should be, the great state of Maine. So, hello, Jenn.
Hey, Tim. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. This is really exciting.
Yes, my pleasure.
Yeah, Vacationland.
Are you a native of Maine?
I'm not. I'm originally from New York, but I've been up here for 16 years. So, when do I stop saying I'm from New York? But I'm not a Mainer, unfortunately.
Okay. 16 years, that's quite a long time, though. And you've adjusted to the winters and all?
Yeah, I stay inside a lot.
Okay.
Put it that way.
Dynamite. Well, Jenn, I'm excited to have you on the program. Jenn and I worked for about 2-ish years on the board of directors of the New England Development Research Association, NEDRA, about 5-6 years ago. So we have that shared passion for prospect research and giving back to the community. And Jenn, you've got some exciting recent developments in your career. If you want to share with our audience, please.
Sure. Yeah, I'm the new director of advancement research and prospect management at Bates College. So I've gone back to higher ed, and as of Friday, it'll be 1 month working there. So yeah.
Awesome. That is great.
Yeah.
And we were talking before I pushed record. There are a few topics about you going back to higher ed and working a hybrid structure that I think would be really interesting to have in our conversation. So let's find ways to build that in. If you want to start at the beginning of your career, because you have in my opinion, you have a very interesting set of different career journeys before you got into the nonprofit world. So if you want to touch on those, Jenn, and how those led to a career in nonprofit prospect management and research, please.
Sure. I think I actually saw a post on LinkedIn. There's a book out there called The Squiggly Career, which I think I have to definitely read because I have a very squiggly career.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it all goes back to, college. I was a French major, didn't know what I wanted to do. I ended up leveraging some connections and wound up in the world of as a paralegal at a law firm, which was really interesting, and utilized my curiosity and my business writing skills. And then I enjoyed training new paralegals, so I thought maybe I'd be a teacher for a bit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it didn't work out so great. I'm an introvert, not an extrovert, so I didn't last too long in that field.
Oh, okay.
But I did meet my husband there in grad school.
Nice. That's a bonus.
Yeah. So I taught for a bit. I've done a lot of things that are not on my LinkedIn profile. I worked at a call center in the French department for a little bit as well.
Okay.
But I really wanted to get into higher ed because education is my passion. First gen college student.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of how I ended up in education and in fundraising. And I can keep going if you want to know how I got into research.
Yeah, please do. But I guess maybe if we pause there. So you mentioned being a first generation college student, and what about that experience for you made you look when the time came to get into working in higher education? And maybe at the time you weren't aware specifically prospect management, but what about that empowerment for you in your life made you want to give back by working in higher ed?
Yeah, well, I originally was really interested in study abroad because I had such a great experience studying abroad junior year. So I wanted to, try and get into that field. And then, I changed courses a little bit, didn't happen. And I just really, thought it'd be great for other students to have that opportunity. And how can I help get them there,
Sure.
And I didn't know what I was doing after college. So it's also great to know that you don't have to know. And
Yeah.
it's all about the college experience. And, it just, the connections you make are just super powerful. So
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And now if you want to talk to us about how you made the transition into prospect management specifically, or, were there other steps once you're in the higher education landscape that then led to prospect management?
Yeah, so I was working at Bowdoin College, and I started.
Okay.
I was the person who did the acknowledgement letters for gifts. So it was a really great way to learn the database and just to learn about fundraising in general.
Okay.
And I thought that the research department sounded really interesting. So when a position opened, I inquired about it and thought it'd be a good match. And I think my paralegal skills came in pretty handy.
Sure.
Initially for that. And they were a great team to work with. Like the people in research, as you know, are just fantastic. So
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
yeah. So, I really enjoyed working in that department. And then I thought, the project management piece was really interesting. So I moved over to Trust for Public Land, and they have a really great project management system. And I learned so much from that team there. So,
Oh, cool.
yeah.
So how long were you at Bowdoin, and then how long were you in prospect management at the Trust for Public Land?
Yeah, we'll call it TPL. We call it TPL.
Oh, okay.
Actually. Yeah, Bowdoin, I think, was like my longest held job. So 7 years. Very proud of that.
Nice. Lucky 7.
Yep. I think I was at TPL for about 4.5 years. So
Okay.
So my longest stints.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
And I think from your LinkedIn that the TPL position was fully remote. Is that, or was that a hybrid?
So it started off kind of as a hybrid position, and the team that I worked with was scattered throughout the country. So it was really interesting to work for a national cause-based nonprofit.
Yeah.
And you have to get used to the time zones. I know Hawaii was really hard to adjust to sometimes. But yeah, it was hybrid in the beginning, but I would go into the office most days.
Oh, okay.
And it was interesting because I worked with the people in the office, but they weren't specifically on my team. So it was kind of felt like a co-working space.
Oh, okay.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So then when COVID hit, we went fully remote, and I think we had to stay remote for the full 2 years.
Oh, okay.
And then people just decided if they wanted to stay remote, go hybrid, and by that point, it was just easier to stay remote. So
Sure. Yeah. Oh, very cool. And now at Bates, and I just have to make this one little, it's not quite a plug, but like I love history. I was a German major. I also did study abroad.
Oh, yeah.
And then I thought, what am I going to do with a German major? So I got a history major on top of that, UMass
There you go.
Amherst. And one of my favorite historical figures is the late Robert F. Kennedy, who enrolled at Bates. Well, he was, I guess enrolled in a way. During World War II, he was a commissioned officer and was in a program at Bates for about 8 months. So when I was doing a little bit of research on Bates in preparation for our chat today, I'm like, I gotta make a comment about RFK. So that's cool.
Nice.
Now, for
Wonderful.
you with Bates, Jen, tell us what was the factor or the motivations to get back into higher education, and what has it been like for you professionally, but also personally, to go from a fully remote position to now a hybrid where you're
Hmm.
home some days and on the beautiful campus other days?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I went through this period where I really enjoyed working from home. It's an introvert's dream.
Uh-huh.
Um, Very flexible. It was wonderful. I think I was missing that colleague connection and just seeing people that you were working with in person.
Yeah,
So I was craving the office, water cooler interaction. But I thought
sure.
that the hybrid model would be really interesting. And then I can have, a piece of the, work from home a little bit and then work in the office a couple days. So in the beginning, it was definitely a mental transition. Like, oh my gosh, how am I going to go from not driving my car
Uh-huh.
ever to having to commute a couple days a week? But I'm
Yeah.
still getting used to it a little bit, but it's been pretty good.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Nice.
Yeah.
And I assume that other people on the team and the department have a similar hybrid structure.
Yeah, we work 3 days in and 2 days at home,
Oh,
which
okay.
is yeah, which is great. I just let my computer and all my notebooks and stuff with me, but I like it.
Yes, same with me. And I'm on campus at Weber State Tuesdays, Thursdays.
Okay.
And then I'm like, and I bring stuff home with me, and I'm like, why do I keep doing this? Like
I know.
everything I have is
I
is
know.
on my computer, and yet
I know.
I don't know if it's like the liberal arts background and having everything in notebooks and whatnot, but
Yeah.
I
It's
still
hard to give up.
it is. Yes, it is.
I'm glad I'm not the only one. It's good to hear that somebody else does that.
Absolutely. Well, Jen, that was a really interesting narrative about how you got into nonprofit work and the roles you've had. Um, what I often do now with my guests is we pivot to other topics that we try to find ways that it applies to your career. And again, with my liberal arts background, I do a lot of research for these interviews. So it's not just my own boring questions
Hmm.
repeatedly. Um, but one I'd like to cover, a few of them actually. I haven't asked this of an interviewee yet, but you have the
Okay.
questions ahead of time. And I've seen even more recent studies about burnout and Americans in general being not very successful at taking the time off that they are allocated as part of their jobs.
Hmm.
So one of the questions comes from a fall of 2019 Harvard Business Review article, which noted, and I'll quote it here: American workers are notoriously bad at using up their vacation time. So, as you reflect on your career, how do you see that in your own life? Because um, you know, having multiple, different roles and a young family and serving on the Nedra board, like there are lots of demands on your time, and just wondering, are you like, do you hoard vacation time and then go to France because study
Hmm.
abroad, or how does that play out for you?
Well, like you with the study abroad piece, I love traveling and I love vacations. So
Uh-huh.
I'm definitely not a vacation hoarder by any means.
Uh-huh.
I don't, try not to abuse taking too much vacations, but it's always nice to just have something to look forward to, have something to plan.
Yeah.
And I think now with a team, I definitely want to model that and know that they need to take their vacations as well,
Oh,
which I
smart.
think is really important.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
That's cool. And I think there was an article I read last week about how in some studies, like American men in particular, have been really bad about that, but the pandemic may have shifted that in general.
Right.
Yeah. So,
And I think
as we,
sorry.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say one of the things that I'm trying that's new this year is saying no more often,
Oh,
because I was on a bunch of committees for a while, and I said I need some time just because there's a lot of demands on my time. I need to free something up.
yeah.
So my goal is to say no a bit more. Which is not as easy as one would think.
Yes. Tell me more about that. I love these unplanned segues in these conversations. So you mentioned the motivation to say no more, but tactically, how does that look? How does it make you feel to recognize I can't take this on right now?
Yeah, because I think at one point I was just taking on, just saying yes to everyone because, that's what we do. We just say, oh yeah, sure. But it's actually quite freeing to be like, you know what, I actually can't right now. And then you never know because it might come back again, and they might ask you down the road, and then it's a better time. I'll say yes now. So
Yeah,
yeah,
very cool. Are these particular to your day job, or are they outside, like a
mostly
volunteer?
outside, like volunteer
Okay.
roles, mostly. So
Yeah,
yeah.
very cool. Well, I admire you for recognizing, what your bandwidth is at the moment, and then articulating, I can't right now, but maybe in the
maybe in the
future.
future. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I really have struggled with too. The last couple of years, like, oh sure, I don't have to drive anywhere,
Right.
so
Yeah.
I've got more time. Let's just
Yeah.
and
More
now I'm at the
Zoom
point.
meetings.
Yeah. Now I'm like, okay. So I'm glad to hear that this has been your experience too, and that you found the wherewithal and the professionalism to say, I'm honored, but I can't right now. So
Yeah.
yeah. But in terms of your volunteering, Jen, this leads to another question from someone I quote quite extensively, and probably should pay him some royalties. Arthur Brooks, a social scientist and a writer for The Atlantic, he said that giving away your energy, expertise, and affection can provide large happiness benefits. And researchers have found that volunteering directly improves happiness. So with the context of you currently being at a point where you're having to budget your energy more judiciously, but as you think back too on your earlier days, what about volunteering has brought happiness to you?
Yeah, and I would agree with that quotation that it definitely can bring happiness. I think the key is just not, doing too much with too little time. But
Yeah.
I loved when we were on the Nedger board together and just the connections that we made there. I think for me, connections is a big chunk of that happiness, being with other people, like-minded people, and doing something for the common good.
Yeah.
And so I've done some work on town committees as well, and that was really interesting.
Okay.
But I think that's more for, down the road without little families, little ones, and, are running around. But,
Yeah.
I definitely get why people who are retired go on those committees. So, but I encourage people to, check out your town and check out local, opportunities, because I think it's a different perspective. And yeah.
So that is interesting. So how did you get involved in like local civic?
It all started with our
issues?
homeowners association, and I could bore you to death about
Okay.
stormwater retention, but I won't. But yeah, it kind of jumped from there, just talking with the town more, and like, oh, I'm, interested in the environment. I'll try out this committee. So
Okay.
Oh yeah, you never know. You never know. Like again, it's like the squiggly career. It's the
Yes.
squiggly volunteerism.
Well, that's really cool. And I think in particular in these times as a society, like getting involved locally is
Hmm.
really important, but it also can be complicated
Yes.
with
Yes.
so kudos to you for dipping your toes in local civic affairs. Um, I I am a pretty liberal person and I live in a pretty conservative state, and so just
Mhm.
trying to find a balance of
Navigate that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I still feel like a recent transplant, although I've been in Utah for 5 years, but you know,
Hmm.
so
You
it's
gotta come to Maine. You gotta, the way life should be, right?
that's right. It is a beautiful state. So
I'm
that's
sure
awesome.
Utah is as well. I've never actually been, but it's on my bucket list. So.
Yeah, it is beautiful. It's much more spread out.
Mm,
So uh very dry and I miss the trees and the rain of New England. So I'm
gotcha.
envious of people like you that get that. So um but Jen, speaking of this transition you've had to do with your career, where you, like most people, worked full-time remote because of the pandemic. Now you're doing a hybrid role. Um, and you've recently gone back into higher education from TPL. How has your view of the work you do in prospect
Mm,
management changed during the pandemic? And so we have evidence, as we just talked about, the work structure and the institutions you've worked for. But what about maybe the pandemic prompted you to think more about how you wanted to allocate your skill set, the expertise you have, and finding where you would feel would be a next stopping point for you in your career?
mm. Interesting question. I'm not sure. Well, I guess I'm sure the pandemic definitely played some sort of role. I think the pandemic helped me realize that I need to be in person with colleagues more.
Okay.
And I think coming back to higher ed, I wanted to take the skills that I learned at TPL. Because like I said, they're top-notch shop over there.
Yeah.
Anyone from TPL is listening.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it just made me think, how can I utilize what I've learned here in a different setting? And
Yeah.
just going back to higher education, is where, what I'm passionate about. So
Excellent. Very good. And how many people are on your team at Bates?
there's 4, and they are
Okay.
also amazing. And this is the biggest team I've ever been on,
Oh, nice.
which I know you've worked on in very large shops, right?
Yeah,
Or-
at my first place.
Yeah.
Ultimately, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah,
So
so
what's that been like for you to manage a team of that size?
well, managing a team is also new to me. So I've been
Okay.
reading a lot of books, watching a lot of Ted Lasso.
Uh-huh.
But no, they're great. It's I'm not really managing. They work really well together. And
Awesome.
they each have their own specialties. So it's been really great getting to work with them as a team. So
Awesome.
I'm excited about that part.
That's cool.
Yeah,
So I understand the Ted Lasso cultural reference. I haven't actually watched an episode yet.
highly
My peer,
recommend.
yes, yeah, and others have recommended it as well. My family has taken over my old podcast studio, and that's where our TV now is.
Got
So,
it.
but I don't know if you were, are there things from Ted Lasso that specifically you like have thought would be helpful in terms of
Hmm.
working with a team of people and in your new role?
Yeah, and actually the way I got into Ted Lasso was there was an APRA on the leadership session, there's like a whole session about Ted Lasso
Oh,
and
okay.
research. So it was really exciting.
Oh, cool.
But for me, I'm also on an adult track team, which not
Oh,
very many people know about. But
okay.
I have a really great coach, and he just makes it really fun, and you want to be there and do your best. And so I was going into this role with that kind of team spirit
Yeah.
mentality. And so Ted Lasso just kind of amplifies that. He's just I'm not as good with words as he is, but he's very
Okay.
inspirational.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's dynamite. Yeah, I feel like, and maybe again, it's our liberal arts backgrounds where like, voracious readers, and you try to see what you can distill from what you're reading into what you're doing in your day job or in the adult
Right.
back team too. So
Yeah. And how do you
cool.
translate it? That's that, German, French background as well.
That's right.
It comes in handy. French comes in handy.
Absolutely. Well, Jen, we have about 10, 15 more minutes tops. Are there any particular topics or experiences that, as you prepared for our conversation today, that you would really hope to bring up? And if so, we've got time, or we can continue with a few of the other questions you have with you.
I think the one thing that I always try to talk about is just networking. I don't know how you, I mean, you network a lot, especially with your podcast. But it's just, I love our network of researchers, and, even outside of that, you never know when, something or someone might, help you in your career or personal life. And, just networking is really, really key, and something I've learned along the way.
Yes. Yeah. Are there particular people or moments that stand out in your own awareness of the value of networking and how that has benefited you as a professional or a person?
Yeah, and I think so I went to the APRA conference over the summer, and I was at this point where I just felt so comfortable with everyone that was there, and I know a lot of the people, and it just felt nice just to talk to people, because that's you're just building relationships. And and I've had some people reach out and for they're working on recruiting people for sessions, and do you know anybody? You know what I mean? So it just, you never know where it'll pop up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that APRA, NEDRA, at the local level, the regional level, that's just such an invaluable resource. And I think, as I look back on my career, I didn't take advantage of it to the extent I probably could have earlier in my career. But yeah, I think as we both served on the NEDRA board, I just felt like that was where it crystallized for me that, the time that we were putting into ideas and content, and not just the annual conference, like the APRA conference you just mentioned, but throughout the year too, and seeing, the payoff, that it was valuable, and it brought people together. So.
Yeah, I think actually, being on the NEDRA board was definitely like that crystallizing moment for me as well. It was like, oh, wow, it's just an amazing network, and you never know.
Right.
A small world.
Well, and I remember after I left the board, I was here in Utah, and you were still on the NEDRA board, and you reached out to me to serve on the scholarships committee, I think it was.
Oh, I did. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were on it for, I think we got you for a year at least, right?
Yeah, it ended up being 4.
Okay. See, you never know. You should have said no.
Well, but Jen, in all honesty, that gets back to your point, which you made earlier, which was so good. Like I was taking on a lot and didn't know how to say no. And I mean, I really enjoyed the work. I loved the opportunity to reconnect with people like you, even though I was now in Utah. and to give back to the community. But I also was like, I can't do all of these things in perpetuity. So how do I say no and let some of these go for a while?
Right. Well, we appreciated having you on the committee. It was cool to have someone from Utah. So,
well, thank you. And thanks for thinking of me, because that meant a lot to be like, okay, like I'm not and others are not, completely cutting off a tie just because I'm not in New England anymore. So,
right.
Yeah,
You'll always be
you.
a New Englander. So.
That is true. Well, Jenn, I'd have one more question for you. It's question number 6. If you have the sheet in front of you, it's relatively, still the start of the new year, and you're in a new role at Bates. What do you wish for yourself this year? And it could be particular to your role, or it could be volunteering or other things. And then how do you envision working to achieve that?
Well, I think for me this year is just being myself. I was talking to someone before going on here, and his advice was like, just be yourself. And so this new year, that's what I'm doing, and that's what I'm learning, that just being you is good enough. And my daughter, she had this little quote that I have to share because I share with everyone.
Please do.
It's you be you and do what you do. So that's my mantra for 2023.
I love that. That is terrific. And I think it's so important, and I don't know, your particular circumstance, but like we both have families, we both have day jobs, volunteering. It's easy to take on those identities to an extent beyond what they require. But I loved how you're both your mantra and your daughter's. That's really the essence of who we ought to be.
Yeah. And I was like, wow, that's really intuitive for an 8-year-old. I love it.
Yes.
I'm going with it.
Yes. Yeah. Just be yourself.
Yeah.
And you've done that today. I think, Jenn, this has been really enriching and fun, because you've talked professionally, you've talked about volunteering, the adult track team, you've mentioned a little bit about your family, Ted Lasso. So I really now have to go watch that.
Yeah, you do. You get to let me know what you think.
Yes, and that's at the core of what I want to do with these conversations, is get at who the person is professionally and personally. And I may not have articulated that to you as I invited you to be a guest, but you've done that today, just being yourself. So my hat's off to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. This is fun.
Yeah, my pleasure, Jenn. Well, for our audience, thank you for watching this when it goes live. I told Jenn it will be on Monday, February 27th, 2023. So just a few weeks. And thank you for your support of this podcast, webcast. You can find Jenn's conversation starting on February 27th on YouTube, as well as my website, People in Fundraising. And Jenn, I wish you all the best. Keep being yourself. And thanks for a great and enjoyable conversation today.
Thank you, Tim. You be well also.
Will do. Thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah.